All right, I'm here at PAX East. This is Sunday, the last day. I didn't even do too much. I only really came and had my first full day, full in quotes, yesterday. But already I'm kind of spent. I've been trying to find time to talk about my experience as a player playing Mork Borg yesterday. And I'm sitting around trying to give my feet a rest, and I figured now's a good time to talk about it. So I was a player in a Mork Borg game yesterday, and it was a 4-hour session, though the actual playing time was right around probably 3.5 hours. So it's always fun. I've read Mork Borg, I've read one of the source books, I've done that on my channel if you haven't seen it, but I hadn't actually played it before or run it. So it's really nice to be able to finally play the game, and the folks running games here, they're all volunteers. They're running games that they clearly enjoy and they like and they're hyped about. And this GM, I didn't get his name, apologies for that, was no exception, and clearly had a lot of enthusiasm for Mork Borg and was very much wanting to show off the system, show off the lore, show off the graphic design of the books even. We spent maybe the first half an hour, 45 minutes creating characters. Ultimately, I'm not sure if that's the best use of the time at the con, given that we have sort of a tight window, so to speak, but I think he wanted to show off all the different features of creating characters. He even used a couple of things from the couple of sort of fan-sourced source books to add a little bit of flair. I ended up with a scum character. We rolled up some random equipment that we didn't have the opportunity to buy equipment. I ended up with chainmail and a shield and a warhammer, even though my strength had a minus, I think I had -2 modifier to my strength. So somehow I had equipped myself like a melee bruiser, but really was more of someone who had presence, not too much agility, not too much else. Again, like I said, it was fun going through it, but like I said, I think that in a con circumstance, I might have said, like, let's just grab some randoms. I think if I was running it, grab some randoms, grab some pre-gens, and then just go. He did highlight a few things. He explained, he had a little pitch on the OSR, basically old school, cheat, do whatever you can to win. Essentially, he talked up the kind of lethality of Mork Borg, though. To be honest, all the characters made it to the end. Nobody died. The one person went down twice, but I found the Mork Borg system was actually pretty forgiving of this person kind of getting knocked about a bit. The adventure had a lot of, I guess I would say, the trappings I think that people would associate with Mork Borg. There's a little bit of kind of body horror. It definitely was sort of creepy, but there wasn't a lot of complexity to it. Now, whether this is good or bad is going to be really up to, I think, who's at the table. And probably for a con game where you don't have no idea where your players are from, what their backgrounds are. When he asked if anybody had not played role-playing games before, nobody raised their hands. But there was at least one person who I wonder if they didn't raise it because they didn't want to feel embarrassed, because it certainly seemed like, anyway, that they didn't know too much about role-playing games, even which dice were which, and sort of thing, which makes me think, this person, if they've played a role-playing game, I'm not sure what they've played, probably haven't at least played too much. The other folks seemed like they'd played a little bit. It felt like, to me anyway, that I had played way more games than they had, which is not really surprising, but interesting for, I guess, these folks picking Mork Borg, because part of it, the whole thing when you go up to sign up for the games is certain times they have a certain number of slots, and in those slots they sometimes offer more than one game for a particular slot, and then it's really up to what the group picks which game is picked. So it wasn't a slot that was specifically for Mork Borg. People had to actually choose it, and I was late to the party and folks had chosen this game. So it's kind of I don't know if that speaks to just Free League and getting the word out and people's interest in Mork Borg. I don't know if people just saw the name. I'm not sure why folks chose that game, but they did. Now, the adventure was really linear. I don't think there were any sort of twists or turns. It was very, very straightforward. Again, I'm not really trying to say this is necessarily a bad thing. I think probably for our table, myself aside, it was probably a good thing, because I'm not sure that these folks would have functioned well if we had been given a more labyrinthine sort of adventure. I think for them, being kind of straightforward and just having the character of sort of the horror elements and playing that up and having fun in the combats was probably enough. I'm coming up with my own opinions on sort of these con games. I mean, not run any, but I've played in some now, and sort of things I think maybe I'll do a video on that at some point. But in this case, it was extraordinarily linear. We started out outside a cathedral. We go in. There's a combat there with a couple of cultists and these really funky creatures who were sort of undead, but they had double jointed limbs, and their bodies were just their mouths, their faces were essentially just a huge mouth with rotating teeth, and when they ate into a body, they basically just consumed it, and then this sack on their backs would fill with a slurry, and then they'd scurry down these holes, and we followed them down there into a hallway, or really it was a storage room, then a hallway, and there were more of these things, more cultists, and we just sort of kind of made our way through there. We saw what they were doing with the slurry, which was some of them were delivering slurry into these sort of tubes or sort of holding tanks, and then other ones were coming and filling up themselves from the holding tanks and then moving further in, so we followed them further in. Came into a big cavern where a sort of cyst-like, and the hall where we came down started to become covered in a flesh coating, which of course is nice and creepy. And then we get down into this sort of cavern where there's some kind of globule, a sort of a sphere, but it was described as kind of a cyst, and it's being suspended over a whirlpool of lava far below, some kind of pit with the lava whirlpool far below. It's being held on by sort of these chitinous attachments, and all these creatures are scurrying up and down, just using the kind of slurry stuff and just adding it to I guess the exterior of the ship. We had captured one of the cultists, and he had mentioned that the end of the world was coming, and we had actually rolled on that end of the world table from Mork Borg, and we determined there were 6 months left till everything ended. And then we came down the ship, and then there were some more kind of cultists who had been mutated, had some interesting mutations. One of them, the top half of this person's body was just a skeleton covered in flame. Someone else was covered in these all their veins were sticking out, and it was all filled with sort of green sort of pus. I forget, the other one had something else going on. I think their arm was a snake. We fought them by hook or by crook, then got to the boss of the ship, who offered us a deal. Hey, join him, basically get mutated or die. And the party actually split. Some of us decided to take the mutation. I was not one of them. Actually, at first I was going to jump in and take the mutation just to do it, because I thought that this might be a spot where some of these other folks might just kind of dither around. And I thought, you know what, I'll take the move. But actually, before I was able to jump in and say, yeah, I'll do it just to do it, somebody else did. We ended up fighting the master of the ship, defeating them, but then one of the persons who got mutated decided to take over the ship, and we ended the adventure where the person who took over the ship, we tried to attack them, failed, and then they unlocked the ship from those chitinous moorings, and we plunged down into either a hellscape or lava or something else, and that's kind of, screen goes black, and then the end. And then the GM told us that both times he'd run the game, ours and one earlier, everybody had done the same thing, taken over the ship and launched it. It seemed like a very epic and fitting conclusion to our Mork Borg adventure, and it was a lot of fun. I think the things I liked the player-facing die rolls. I thought it works pretty well. I like the fixed DC. Hey, you have to beat 12, and sometimes there's a plus or a minus, but ultimately, beat 12 and you hit, which made it really easy, especially for new folk. Didn't have to memorize a lot of stuff. You just roll 12 and you hit. I liked armor class as damage reduction. I thought worked pretty well. All the characters had kind of one special thing, which I think was really nice to handle. My ability didn't really have any use, which was kind of what I rolled up was I had sort of some lock picks, and I could do some lock picking. It never came up. It was very clear early on that there wasn't going to be much tricksy stuff here. I at one point looked to check traps and do some of that stuff, and nothing came up, and I just had the feeling like I don't think there's anything here to do that. And sure enough there wasn't. You could say that's maybe a fault of the adventure, but I think with this group, I think it worked pretty well. All in all, it was a good time. I enjoyed my Mork Borg play. I think it's given me some things to think out now that I've actually been able to play some of the stuff I only read about. It was good. I'm not sure I'm going to get another game in this afternoon, but I'm going to try. We'll see. But that's my report. Game on. Talk to you later. Bye, everybody.